Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. In this video today we are going to see how we can deploy a virtual vCenter server inside a nested ESXi host using VMware Workstation. I will quickly switch to the VMware Workstation. As you can see here, this is the nested hypervisor that I have installed. I've given sufficient amount of memory so that I can perform a tiny installation of vCenter server. So that's the IP address and the name of the ESXi host which I have given to the ESXi host. So I'm accessing this ESXi host from a Windows machine. And I have made all the necessary storage requirement for the virtual center server installation on the ESXi host. The data store is already configured. We are not going to focus on the networking part. So there you go. As you can see, the data store I have configured is of 100 GB, thin provisioned. Now to deploy a vCenter server, we will be using the vCenter ISO, which we will mount on this Windows machine, which is my domain controller here. Since it's mounted, as you can see here, there are multiple folders, so we will go to the UI installer folder. We have 3 different flavors: Linux, Mac and Windows. Since we're running it from the Windows, so we will go to the Win32 folder and look for the installer application. Let's double click on the installer application. Okay, as you can see here, the install wizard for vCenter installation started. Now there are multiple options available since it is a new deployment, so we will click install. So that is the stage 1. We will proceed the wizard by clicking next, accept the EULA, and then we will type in the IP address of the target ESXi host where our vCenter server is going to be created. We'll key in the credentials for the ESXi host to authenticate. And once we click next, it will prompt us for the certificate validation. Click yes, and we will proceed. Okay, now let's give it a suitable name to the vCenter server. This name will appear in the vSphere UI inventory. We'll set the root password for the vCenter appliance. This password we can use to manage the appliance, such as upgrading, taking backup, etc., and making any changes to the services that are running, stop, start, etc. Now, since it is a test lab environment, so we are going to proceed with the tiny deployment. You can find this chart online as well to check for how much memory, CPU and storage is needed for a tiny, small to medium deployment. Okay, we're going to select thin provision. Next, now here is the network setup for the vCenter server. So it is by default picked up the VM network, the standard switch configuration of the ESXi host. We are going to give a static IP address for the vCenter server, and the FQDN, we will be creating a host record in our DNS server so that it can authenticate to the Active Directory. So let's type in the IP address, desired IP address of our vCenter server. So in our case, I'm using 21.20, the subnet mask, and the default gateway. We'll also key in the DNS server name. In my case, it's the same DNS server name that I'm using. You can click on the information icon to read the information, what it does, what information is needed. So let's switch to the DNS and we will create a host record for our vCenter server. We'll go back just to validate what is the name we have given. So we will try to give the same virtual machine name as the DNS host record also. Okay, once the host record is created, we will now switch to the install wizard. Okay, let's key in the FQDN information, which is VCSA-1A, the fully qualified domain name. Okay, it just did a quick validation of the FQDN followed by the IP. So this is the overall summary of stage 1. Click next and it will proceed. Now this will take a while. At this moment we are deploying the vCenter server, so a creation of VM will happen on the ESXI host if the connection is successful, which we have already seen. There you go. That's the vCenter server virtual machine which is created inside the ESXI host. As of now it is not powered on because it is in the process of getting deployed. Okay, so we just made 1% progress. In my past experience, what I've observed is after the stage 1 is complete, it will try to query the DNS server, the name that we have given. If it is able to successfully make a DNS query, stage 2 will proceed without any hiccup. But if for some reason it cannot talk, we might encounter error. So at this point our vCenter server is created, and yeah, we're just going to check if we are able to ping the IP address of the vCenter server and the host name. Is it resolving? So that looks good. So that means we are good to go to the stage 2. Okay, we are almost there, 94%. Perfect. As you can see here, our stage 1 deployment is successful. So now if we click continue, it will go to the URL at port 5480. Okay, so now we are moving to stage 2. Let's click next. Here we will just use the basic setting like synchronize with the ESXI host and enable the SSH, which we are not going to explore anyways, but for the time being I'm enabling it, and we click next. What I've observed is in stage 2 nothing much happens, but the services starts. We will see that in any moment now. Okay, so now we have to create the single sign-on domain information, the username, the password, and the domain. So I'm going to use the default vSphere.local. Since we do not have any other vCenter environment, so this is our first deployment, we will proceed with the first option. Let's click next. So I'm going to exclude myself from the customer improvement program, and then here is the summary. So where we can validate the IP address we have assigned, the host name for the vCenter server, followed by the SSO information. Once we click finish, now this process is irreversible. If anything goes wrong in this phase, the entire deployment goes into corrupt state. There is no rollback option, so we have to deploy a new vCenter server right from the scratch. I haven't checked with VMware support on this, but yeah, in my experience that's what I've seen. Probably there is a backdoor entry wherein we can make or modify something which will go back to the stage 2 initial phase, but I'm not sure about that. Okay, so as you can see here, now in the stage 2 it's pretty much starting these services. So starting VMware authentication framework service, followed by lookup service, content library service. So since I have skipped it, so you can see these services are starting in a sequence. Okay, we are making good progress, and anytime we will complete our deployment. I think few of the services in the list takes time. There you go, our stage 2 is completed successfully. Now we can try to log into the vCenter UI by clicking on that hyperlink, or we can open a separate browser and just type in the vCenter URL or FQDN. That will redirect us to the UI. There you go. Let's click on advance and accept the certificate warning. Okay, we'll close this dialog box since we have completed the deployment. Okay, let's key in our single sign-on credentials, which is administrator@vsphere.local. So far the deployment looks in order. I mean, we haven't encountered any error, which is a good sign. There you go. So we managed to log into the vSphere UI or the client for the first time. Now we will see if we can add the host where the virtual machine or the vCenter server is created, so that we can manage it, do the centralized management from our vCenter server. So there is a resource contention. As you can see, CPU is already exhausted. Okay, let's create a new data center. I'll just give it a name, data center -1, and click OK. The data center is created. Now let's try to add the ESXI host. I'll key in the IP address of the ESXI host. Key in the credentials, which is the root credentials of the ESXI host. If the connection is successful, it will prompt for the certificate alert. There you go. Click next, finish. It is a trial version, so which is absolutely fine. We are not going to look at these settings, so we are going to mark the ESXi in data center 1. There you go. Okay, let's drag this recent tasks a little up to see the status. Okay, so we are at 80%. So far so good. Awesome. So we have managed to add the ESXi host, or the nested ESXi host that we use to create our virtual machine or the vCenter server, and we can also add it to manage the ESXi host. So that's the end of the video. I hope you find this video informative to do your lab testing at home. Thank you for viewing.